I guess we'll start then. History of the Future of the Grange in Transition by Gus Frederick, me, Grange number 748, April 77th. So anyway, the Grange, let's see here. Let's start, make sure this thing, there we go. Yep, and the patrons of husbandry is what the P and H means, and the Grange is a registered trademark of the U.S. Grange. And how did it start? Way back in the 1870s, our society was going through a transition, like it was going through right now, you know, getting off carbon fuels to more electrified, whatever. But then it was, the big new technology was steam engines, locomotives especially, communications. They were able to send ideas and issues and whatever vast distances by way of the train. Around this time, the labor movement was starting to get off on a run in the cities and in some of the other factory areas, mines and whatnot. And analogous to that, there was kind of a rural, not really union thing that started, but kind of a movement, if you will. They call it the Granger movement. And see, that's not quite focused here. Here we are. And the Granger movement is kind of neat because you got all this poster is one of the major posters of the time. And I plead for all, I rule for all, that's the president. I fight for all, I preach for all, and it just goes on and down. Sail for all, I like this one. Central exchange, I fleece you all, I psych you all, and whatever. And the key thing here is I feed you all. So that's the farmer. Farmer is providing the mechanism for everyone else to do their stuff in civilization. The Granger movement started in, like I said, in the late 1860s. This gentleman was hired by then President Grant to go through the South during Reconstruction to determine how they could unify a lot of the farmers and whatnot. And the Grange founders were these gentlemen as well as this woman. The Granger movement was unique in that it included women from the get-go as an equal footage. So they had, you know, the same voting rights and being able to run for the same offices as any of the male counterparts. Carolyn A. Hall is one of the co-founders of that, and that's her right there. And here's another picture. Google Books has been very helpful in finding old publications that relate to the Grange that came out, and there was quite a few, because this was quite an extensive movement at the time. The gift of the Grangers, these three positions were reserved for women, Flora, Ceres, and Pomona, which are delightfully paganistic, referring to flowers, grains, and fruit. That's what Flora, Ceres, and Pomona means in regards to the three graces, if you will. And here are the implements, kind of very loosely focused on or off of the Masonic lodges. These are kind of, in a way, kind of a lot of Masonic type stuff that was transposed into the Grange movement, with the major exception, of course, being that women were involved on an equal basis, where that wasn't the case in the Masons for many years. Excuse me here for a moment. And here's another woodcut showing some of early Granger meetings. The farmers' movement, they called it that, meeting of the Grangers in the woods near Winchester, South County, Illinois. Needless to say, the western part of the United States had more of a Grange movement than back east. The Grange Pomona meeting, a Grange Pomona, of course, was a a Grange organization. It's a county level. Excuse me. And the marches and tableau for degree work in the Granges. These little exotic things you had to do to get your different degrees and movements in the Grange. And this was a really cool little photo book that I found from 1920. Sarah H. Holland, showing all the different positions and tableau and marches for degree work in the Granges. And there's another one of the posters, shows this stalwart young Granger standing there leaning on a shovel, and little different sections showing how the men and the women combined a team that worked on the farm to make everything run operationally. And of course, ignorance and sloth, you don't want to, you want to work hard and all that stuff. So this is kind of an interesting thing they threw on that poster as well. And here's some of the books that I found that were published around this period, early 1870s primarily. Grains for the Grangers, the 7th session of the National Grange, Patrons of Husbandry. Oregon, of course, was a very early adopter of the Grange, as were a number of other western states. And these are some more of the stories here. And this is an advertisement I found in Free Thought magazine from out of Chicago in the 1890s. History of the Grange movement, the farmers' war against monopolies. Sounds quite radical, actually, pretty neat. Being a full and authentic account of the struggles of the American farmers against the extortions of the railroad companies. Because the big thing was what they called the middleman, and they still talk about the middleman to this day in regards to health care. Basically, someone saying, take the money from the farmers, pay it to the railroads, and skim off a chunk for themselves. The Farmers' Wrongs, Order of the Patrons of the Husbandry, and this is kind of another more detailed into the weeds description of how that whole started. Life among the middlemen, there they are, drinking fine booze and being entertained by ladies and stuff while taking the bucks from the farmers. A middleman's dream of his plunder. I love this illustration. You got the little forks and knives stuck into the pigs already. And then yet another, this is a mentor for the Granges and the homes. This is kind of an interesting manual, if you will, for how to be a good Granger and do it. And again, published. Now this was kind of the more interesting ones I found. An expose of the Grangers containing the opening and closing ceremonies of a Grange's lodge, ceremonies of initiation, and the 8 degrees of order, being an accurate description of one of the greatest monopolies of the age. Those that know me know that I kind of love parody and satire, and this was no different. This is incredible. A Granger driving his own pork to market. And this is great. A female Granger on the lookout for her flock. A middleman is supposed to have had made way with them. And in the Grange drumming out the middleman. And these are all illustrations in this one book. It was pretty funny. And this is actually more serious, of course. Article 7, Preamble of the Constitution of the National Grange. The soil is the source from whence we derive all that constitutes wealth. Without it, we will have no agriculture, no manufacturers, no commerce. The art of agriculture is the parent and precursor of all arts, and its products the foundation of all wealth. The productions of the earth are subject to the influence of natural laws, invariable and indisputable. The amount produced will consequently be in proportion to the intelligence of the producer, and the success will depend upon his knowledge or action of these laws in the proper applications of those principles. In other words, treat the earth good and it will treat you good. And one of this obviously led to a lot of legal issues, and this is one of the first major issues that came before the Supreme Court. Moon versus Illinois. And this was held that grain warehouses were a private utility of the public interest. Before that, the middlemen would control these. So if you're a farmer trying to sell your grain to some big outfit, you had to go through these middlemen, and one of those was being stored in a grain silo or whatever. And they finally decided that those who are in the public interest, and it's a public utility or private utility, is in the public interest. So they made it so that they couldn't just regulate everything out of existence for the farmer against the farmer's wills. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this time is known for an enhanced transportation. And one of that, of course, was the railroads and the mail system by virtue of that. And this guy was kind of like the Amazon of his day, Aaron Montgomery Ward, where he'd ship out massive catalogs of different stuff that the farmers, now they can order this stuff. They can order the stuff, it'll come by train, and they'll be able to get to it. Whereas before, without the rail link, it was just kind of hard to get anything new, to deal with peddlers, little wagons that would come around to different places. And obviously this allowed for a much more number of wild and exotic products. Of course, Mr. Sears came along probably maybe 20, 30 years after them and did basically the same thing. Also around this time, a lot of the farmers started co-oping, cooperatives, building all these different organizations, loosely based through the Grange, but otherwise just organizations. And we got you see a lot of these co-ops still to this day around here in Oregon. Daniel Clark was the worthy master of the Oregon State Grange, 1875, talking about how that Grange system is growing. We received on the 6th of January, 1872, the application for the first subordinate Grange in Oregon, with Marshfield Grange being number 1. And then the Grange was formed, Oregon Grange was formed September 24th, 1873, primarily at the Masonic Lodge in Salem. And then by 1877, this is how much it's grown. Oregon State got 199. Washington and Idaho Territory, of course, they didn't become actual states until the late 1880s. And these folks were instrumental in the Oregon Grange. Libby and William Hillary, out of Corvallis primarily. Excuse me. He wrote an interesting book called the Webfoot Volunteers, about Oregon's involvement in the Civil War. And he had a rather healthy section in that book about his and his wife's involvement in organizing the Oregon Grange. And of course, got to have a cartoon by Davenport here. And around this time was the growth, they called the Gilded Age, the growth of the trusts, which were what we'd call monopolies now, conglomerations of different businesses get together to fix prices and whatnot. Dollar Mark Hanna speaking to the people, ladies and gentlemen, stick with the trusts. They're your only true friends. Don't you see how happy they've made you? I mean, it's time, and time repeats itself. It's incredible. So you got this trust brute in the back, which is Homer's personification of the corporate power, and then you got the farm folk with the little skeleton guy in the background, which is kind of a little thing, and then the threat before the fight, the forces of the opposition, and we got all the common folk on the left, and the trusts lined up on the left, the other on the right, with Dollar Mark Hanna with a bullwhip. Then we got the coal trust, the sugar trust, Standard Oil trusts, and they're all there to whip society into shape, as it were. And again, the Grangers were, there moving forward. Some of the major issues of the Granger movement were quite incredible when you think about it. Regulation of railroads, for example, making sure that even though they are independent private organizations, they can't just run willy-nilly over the common people. Regulation of grain warehouses, ditto on that. Cooperative extension services, this is a biggie, working with local universities and college to provide these extensive extension services, which are still in existence to this day. Oregon State Extension Service, of course, is the one we know most about around here. Free rural mail delivery. There's another one with increased access to rails and stuff like that. It made it so that this could be more of a reality. Back in the old, primarily horse and buggy days, mail was not delivered to the farms. People had either a mailbox or they had it sent general delivery to the nearest post office or nearest small town that had a post office. So that was another biggie there. The farm credit system. was developed around the same time. Women's suffrage, the right to vote for women. The Grangers were very early proponents of that. Popular election of U.S. senators, yet another one. A lot of people don't realize that until around the turn of the century, in many of states, their senators were appointed by either the governor or the legislature. Oregon led the way in many regards, where we had that earlier. Temperance and alcohol prohibition. Well, 1 out of 9 ain't bad. So, needless to say, they got prohibition, but went away because it didn't work. And this is the Oregon system from 1902. Oregon becomes the first state in the Union to adopt a fully functional initiative and referendum system by overwhelming popular vote. And this gentleman, Alan Eaton, wrote this incredible book that I found in Smith Brothers bookstore in Eugene called The Oregon System, talking about the story of direct legislation in Oregon, and it's a very, very fascinating book. I highly recommend it, talking about the election of senators, women's right to vote. We actually had female suffrage in 1912, way before many other places did. Sadly, with Mr. Allen, he was a state representative for a while, but on the eve of World War I, he had the temerity to oppose entry into that war and was basically blacklisted and ran out of town, if you will. He was in Eugene, ended up moving to western North Carolina and became very instrumental in the folk art movement back there. And Governor T.T. Gear. Now, he was an interesting character, besides the fact that he was one of Homer Davenport's cousins. Anyone's familiar with Gear-Crested Farm, of course, the same family. Well, he was Oregon's first native-born, quote-unquote, governor. And T.T. Gear was known for bikes. He was an avid bicyclist, and he would ride his bike, weather permitting, of course, from the Waldo Hills to the Capitol, and proposed a lot of legislation to get extensive networks throughout the state of bike trails, some of which came to fruition, many of which didn't, because after automotive, petroleum-powered vehicles came along, it kind of shoved the whole bike thing into the background for many, many years, as it turned out. But Gear was right on top of that, trying to get that happening. And that brings us to the relocalization of stuff. Because back in the day, again, primarily because of transportation issues, a lot of stuff that we take for granted was produced locally. The Fisher Flour Mill, of course, was Silverton's big major industrial operation where the farmers that grew the grain would haul it into town, and it would be processed here and then shipped out by rail elsewhere. Over the years, that whole system became more petroleum dependent, so you'd have fewer and fewer central locations where things would be shipped in. Well, we'll just ship it in from San Francisco, So we don't have to have this warehouse here in Oregon. We'll just do it that way. Well, of course, that gets to the point where that kind of, as fuel costs went up, it became more of an issue. We should look back on maybe relocalizing again. And here's one of the delivery wagons from the Fisher Flour Mills here. Even got the little dog up there in the front. And the other thing was kind of interesting, people don't generally think about, is some of the other ancillary activities that also were local. For example, this incredible illustration went on a gallon can of rolled oats, but it was all produced locally by local artists and local printers. So even though Fisher Flour Mills was in the grain industry, they still supplied, promoted art, or local artists were able to make a living off of some of this stuff. There's another one here, Silver Creek Creamery. Really, I love the illustration, a little picture of the cows there. And then yet another one, DeGuire's Dairy, raw milk. They, of course, later on started pasteurizing as well and still offering raw milk, but primarily it was kind of an interesting, they were down by the middle school, Mark Twain rather, not the original middle school, Mark Twain. And this is another shot, I love this, is a store showing all these organically grown fruits and vegetables, or as our ancestors referred to them, as fruits and vegetables. Because then they were all organic. And this is, this store was approximately where the Italian restaurant is now, on North Water Street. Pretty neat. There's little plaques around town. You can read some of the history about some of the things. And then Silverton's Fruit Show. This is a neat little picture here showing the different apples and whatnot from the area. And then another thing that, you know, people tend to forget is that electric vehicles were not really a new deal. You know, they were, this is an advertisement from 1897 promoting the electric vehicle, electric cab and delivery service out of New York City. And they had these little things. Of course, they didn't have the range we did now. But at this time, you know, petroleum or ICE, internal combustion engines, were competing with electric vehicles as well as steam vehicles at the time. And of course, petroleum won out because of its convenience of just dumping in the proper amount of liquid and you're off, as opposed to plugging the rig in and letting it sit for hours to charge up. Of course, when you think about it, if they would have had that entire time from 1897 to now as research and development to improve batteries, we probably would be a little bit better off. But playing catch up, here we are. And ooh, what's that? The Sacred Oak in the middle of Main Street, looking back into different ways of living in the civic community. This is an interesting image here, a rooftop garden. I believe this is in Detroit. No, it's Pittsburgh rather, where they got this organic garden going on the top of a building. And a number of places are doing that. There probably could be more. Here's another one. This is in Detroit. America's first agri-hood in Detroit. It feeds 2,000 households for free from this 1,280 acre garden and fruit orchard with 200 trees. So I read about this guy years ago, and he's pretty, apparently it's still going. It's an interesting program out of Detroit because there's a lot of vacant land after the automotive industry pulled up stakes and left town, so they're able to come in there. And then, of course, some of the other aspects of modern groceries and stuff like that, you know, USDA organic and certified humane, these are different labels that they were able to add on to different commodities and whatnot. And this is kind of interesting. I tried to get an updated version. This one only goes to 217, but it's listing farmers market directory listings, and you can see the growth of farmers market. Back in the day, you know, even in the 1940s and 1950s, there were still active farmers markets in Portland. You know, they kind of petered out as grocery stores and whatnot became more prevalent, and but they made a big comeback, you know, because now I got a lot of, and Silverton itself has not only a thriving farmers market. It used to be only for half a year, but now, as we know it, they have it going through the winter as well. So it's the demand fuels that. And then here's an interesting item here, a graph showing the growth of organic food sales versus regular total food sales. So it's a little bit higher curve than all of it altogether. And then you got this very interesting, organic food industry sales versus growth. And so we got the growth right here, determining how much money was made or in dollars, and then the growth of the industry itself going down. So why would that be? That seems kind of counterintuitive until you look at this graph here, where, you know, I would call it from high anxiety engulf and devour. So you can see all these major corporate Heinz and Cadbury, Schweppes, Kraft, so they're gobbling up all these different small, at one time, independent organic food sources. Here's some more right here, and you can see, how they just kind of realize that, hey, we want a piece of this action, so they jump right in and stole it. And then the future. The future is here, and this is the concept of the future, circa 1950s. Yeah, we'll all still be driving big, massive cars, and we'll just have more of them, and rails, and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, that kind of didn't go over the whole time. So this is global oil production. This is kind of an interesting thing. It kind of goes into the whole peak oil concept, where you reach a certain point where you're using more than is available, because frankly, oil is a non-renewable resource that, it is renewable over the course of tens of millions of years, but generally speaking, not so much. And this is a little short video clip here. Let's see if I can get this to work. Kind of shows you, this is from 1958, Bell Telephone Hour. Okay, the premise is the Sun Power Bank.
Well, suppose all our energy had been deposited in the Sun Power Bank Incorporated, founded millions of years ago, with assets unlimited. In 1850, each American, for instance, withdrew enough fuel from the fuel bank to generate 400 horsepower hours for himself. But nobody worried too much about it. Our assets still appeared unlimited. In 1950, each American withdrew 10,000 horsepower hours from Sun Power Incorporated, while atomic scientists were making some minor deposits. This began to worry us. Our assets were becoming definitely limited. By 1975, we'll probably withdraw 20,000 horsepower hours each.
Actually, more like 30.
Fuel deposits will stave off the run for some time, but there's only so much uranium and thorium in the world, and that will go too.
When the principal's gone, you're going to have to live on your income, huh?
But our income is only about 10% of our power spending. We'd need help.
Every day I send you 1,000 times more power than you use in a year.
That was pretty radical at the time, seeing that, because came out in 1958, right there at the height of the Cold War. The Russians had just beat us into space with Sputnik, and oh my God, we got to educate the people for science. So Bell Telephone Labs, corporate production, hired Frank Capra of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington fame to produce these series. I mean, it's just incredible. I got another clip a little bit later on along these same lines. Anyway, the top myth of modern society. Continued growth fueled by non-renewable energy source will continue indefinitely. And that's basically how we've been running the world for, the last 50, 60 years, post-World War II, if you think about it. And this is the Transition Handbook. I think we got a copy here. This started in England about maybe 10, 15 years ago. In other words, the idea being transitioning from a petroleum-based society to a more relocalized and local resilience approach. And these are some of the little things: transition projects, sharing engine, how communities can be involved in moving towards more local resiliency, how the project sharing engine fits into the project's life. It's pretty neat. Basically, a lot of the stuff that the Grange is working on here. The Grange, in fact. Another aspect was financial, back around the term. The United States Treasury, the medium through which the national legislature robs the people, from the history of the Grange movement. So it's the United States Treasury building back in the 1870s. Here's some Granger notes, where they had actually Grange-based monetary system in different situations. There's one, a $20 bill note here, and here's our own. During the Prohibition, when cash was loose, wasn't available, Silverton was producing the Silverton script. which every once in a while I can still find on eBay. And this was the sawmills, and some of the merchants in town will exchange these. They didn't have the money, the cash to pay their workers, so they would pay them in this Silverton script, which was transferable in the local community, in stores and whatnot. And of course, Homer Davenport helped illustrate it. It's kind of neat. And you got the Silver Falls on
Well,
top.
is that like money? Like,
Exactly.
that-
Yeah.
Just
Exactly.
in Silverton.
But just for Silverton. Here's another example. These are river dollars from the Hood River area, where this was an active program that was going about 10 years ago. I'm not sure where it's at this point. But I did this talk at a Grange up in Hood River, and someone put in the donation bin for my gas funds a couple of these. So I figured, I got to use this for my next show. There's another story about that. River Hours, local currency of the Columbia Gorge. So it's kind of neat concept here. And then relocalization. And that's, again, part of the transition movement. Relocalization basically is bringing back more services to the local level, like it used to be. For example, Ross started out, well, now they're Canadian, but what can you say? Started out here in Silverton, and they actually were pretty good. And to this day, they really still are. This is their main office in Salem. They outfitted it with photovoltaic solar cells to run the power for the plant. And then, of course, you got different stuff. There's Orville and the team here. And these are some examples of locally produced commodities that Ross supported. Where there's smoke, Joel Autry's hot barbecue sauce, which is making a comeback, I might add. And then sorta sausage from our old friend Molly. Yeah. And so that was pretty good. Unfortunately, that didn't keep going, but it was, they were pretty good. I remember those. And then here's Joel's stuff. It's back on the shelf. So if you see this in the store, you can probably, I want to get a jar and have them autograph the jar for me. And again, some of the other items from Ross, the Western Family brand that they would sell, they're kind of their house brand. But again, it's located out of Portland. So even though it's not Silverton located, it's Oregon located. And then some of the things that the Grange does, for example, hosting local candidates forum, of which another one's coming up next Wednesday. So we kind of get involved with the community quite a bit. There's another shot of that, Mike Ashland and some of the other folks.
School board members that are going to be?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's this Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday's the school boards, yeah. Yep. And then, of course, our landmark goodie event, if you will, CD Saturday, which started a number of years ago from a Granger that had just joined us and said, oh yeah, we used to do this thing called CD Saturday. Very popular, very popular. Here's the masses in here, exchanging seeds and whatnot. And our extension agent from Oregon State, of course, Beth, and she's actually very involved in SACA to this day, Silverton Area Community Aid, and the Silverton Food Co-op, and then one of our local produce people, Melody Harpole, and her produce, and then the Locomotive Movement, Silverton Food Co-op. I'm not sure what the members, how many owners we have now. I think it's more. It's been chugging along for years. So, and then here's another shot of that. And this is kind of an interesting article from New York Times. New food culture, a young generation of farmers emerge. And these are some folks, young farmers in Corvallis. And I had went to a cool party. I was at the actually party at the Mary's River Grange, which is a center of social life, and a lot of these remote granges kind of got grayed out, if you will. They had all these old folks there that were running the things from the the 50s on, and as they grew up and got away from the thing, some of the I don't want to say radical, but I guess they kind of are. Young folks jumped in and said, hey, I like to be a Granger. And that's how I learned about the Granger from my friend Randy Embry. She says, hey, the Granger's going to close. You should join, and we'll take it over. And we did. And we're still here. And there's some more folks. This is up at Gearcrest Farm when they're doing more active stuff. And then the Green Grangers, kind of a loose organization that it turned out that we started referring to ourselves, Silverton Granges, as Green Grangers, and then going to some of these meetings with other Granges, we started finding that many other ones are along the same, they're very interested in the same things that we were. So we kind of formed this incredibly loose thing called the Green Grangers. Some of the more traditional, if you will, Grangers were alarmed, seeing it as, akin to communism, I guess. I don't know. But it was this whole 1950s us against them mindset that kind of persisted for many years, but I think it's finally going away. That leads us to the 7 blunders of the modern world: wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, science without humanity, worship without sacrifice, politics without principle, and commerce without morality, from our good friend Gandhi. And I think these are great words of wisdom for any organization. And here's We Are the Real Grange. They registered the trademark. There was a couple of commercial outfits where I think it was one of the meat manufacturers going to have a Granger chicken, and they said, wait a minute, we own that name.
What does the P&H stand for?
Patrons of Husbandry.
Oh, got it.
Mm-hmm. And this is a kind of a fun cartoon I modified after David Horsey, LA Times. Those Green Grangers are trying to take over the Grange. Next thing you know, we'll be forced to eat weeds and sprouts. Why do you people want to change our Grange? We don't. We just want to be part of an American tradition with hometown roots. And so that kind of speaks to the whole controversy, the alleged controversy, and so it's kind of interesting. It ain't easy being green. And so I got this whole line of green stuff, greener products, so green became the thing, The making and marketing of sustainable brands. This is my favorite. Carbon-free sugar. Carbohydrate, that term refers to sugar. But here, so I don't know what it is, it's empty. But anyway, it's certified carbon-free. Then we got carbon-free pest control, weed fungicides and insecticides. This one's great. National fuel, green petroleum. And then, of course, Green Party of New Zealand. And for illustrative purposes only, Jill Stein for the Green Party. And Green Bay Packers. And the Green Hornet. And the Green Lantern. And, of course, there's cultural issues, like Ireland and our friends in the Middle East. They all like the color green as well. And green is universal. That's the bottom line here. So this is what's really fascinating. In the mentor of the Granges and the homes of the patrons of Husbandry, Grange scripture, if you will, from the 1870s. In that entire book, there's only one color mentioned. Guess what? The emblem of the Order for Brethren is a green ground in which rests a plow surmounted with a sheaf of wheat. Yeah, so that's it. So we are the real Grange, and we're going to go with it. And this is one, let's see if I can get this one to go too. This is global warming.
What would happen if we could change the course of the Gulf Stream or the other great ocean currents, or warm up Hudson Bay with atomic furnaces?
Extremely dangerous questions, because with our present knowledge, we have no idea what would happen. Even now, man may be unwittingly changing the world's climate through the waste products of his civilization. Due to our release through factories and automobiles every year of more than 6 billion tons of carbon dioxide, which helps air absorb heat from the sun, our atmosphere seems to be getting warmer.
This is bad.
Well, it's been calculated a few degrees rise in the Earth's temperature would melt the polar ice caps. And if this happens, an inland sea would fill a good portion of the Mississippi Valley. Tourists in glass-bottom boats would be viewing the ground towers of Miami through 150 feet of tropical water. Foreign weather, we're not only dealing with forces of a far greater variety than even the atomic physicist encounters, but with life itself.
And that was from 1958.
Wow.
And it was played in schoolrooms. I remember watching this as a little kid. Yeah, anyway, it was broadcast nationally. Again, Frank Capra was the producer and director of that. So it boils down to one thing. It's the earth is in our hands. So, and then I'm going to conclude with this really cool graphic from Thomas Nast, cartoonist from Harper's Weekly, November 20th. Uncle Sam's Thanksgiving dinner. And for the time, 1869. Think about this. You got this huge, come one, come all, free and equal. And you got all these races of the world, you know, different peoples. Even have cartoonists in there. Enjoying a meal together. So that's that. And with that, I guess I can take questions, go through the exits to the gift shop, annotated cartoons, Davenport's father, and the Silverton Connection, my partner Fred here, and selected articles about Free Thought Liberal University of Oregon. So anyway,